What is up, podcast land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. And before I introduce a fascinating guy, Justin Atherton, you're going to love him. Down there in Texas, where they just had a shit ton of cold weather and snow and things they haven't seen in forever, threw them upside their head. And right now, we got 25 inches of snow outside my window, and we're trucking along like it's normal. We had in school today, so that's just a difference in how we handle certain chaoses in our lives. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I truly do appreciate it, as always. If you can do me a favor, wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Google, Stitcher, Pandora, iHeart, wherever it is you listen to podcasts, please hit the subscribe button, the automatic download button. Make sure you share it. This is episode 99, coming up on the century mark of my podcast. I'm really excited about what 100 is going to be because I have no idea who it's going to be yet. But I'm really thankful for this opportunity to have a platform to share stories like Justin's with all of you. If you want to hear more about me, you want to hear more about where you can get a copy of my book, Brothers Love a Memoir, which was a story I wrote about, my life story about with my brother, Andrew. Andy was autistic and a severe stutter and unfortunately passed away in a car accident in 1989. And that's our life story growing up, and it's the greatest accomplishment of my life. You can go to mattcubbler.com to learn more about that. Speaking stuff, leadership development stuff, youth mentoring stuff, anything else that you're interested in, you can find it at my website. So without further ado, my man Justin, what's up, bud?
How's it going, man? Glad
I'm
to be
good,
here,
brother.
man.
It's a pleasure to have you on, man. We don't know each other. We met through a mutual friend, Lucas Mack, who made the introduction, and we were supposed to be on last week, but that was during the world is ending in Texas fiasco.
Yeah, froze over a little bit, no power. It's interesting what 3 to 4 inches of snow can do in a state that gets 0 most of the time. So, like you said, you're dealing with 25 inches, like it's no problem. It would be the end of the world down here, man.
It's just always fascinates me what nature does, and then how it impacts certain environments and how people adapt or don't adapt to those
Sure.
chaotic environments. And I can tell you, there's things up here that we couldn't handle, like severe heat waves. People would lose their minds up here, even though it gets hot in the summertime. But if it was like 110 with 95% humidity, people would be losing their shit on a daily basis. There'd be Home Depots robbed. People would be stealing people's electric. They'd be getting ACs. It'd be crazy. So I can totally understand what it's like when you have a place where there's no snow and all of a sudden God dumps some of that white stuff and frozen stuff, and people don't know how to drive in it. They don't have the roads prepared. It's just a complete nightmare.
All the above. Yeah.
Well, listen, everybody that comes on the show gets asked the same question. I asked the question for a specific reason. It's because I want to open up your mind and see where you're at when I ask this very broad and oftentimes difficult question. As a cop yourself, you understand how opening up a suspect or a victim's mind so that they start to remember things that they may not have thought of. By opening up the broad macro view, you can get down to the micro.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody else. Who is Justin Atherton?
Yeah, that is a very broad question. First off, I'd say I'm a father. I'm someone now that really I focus on integrity, authenticity, and honesty. Those are my 3 values that I focus on. I have a background in law enforcement. It spans over 15 years. Done everything from being gang intelligence, SWAT team, detective, supervisor. I think the most rewarding part that I've been glad to be part of has been the training program, whether it's training officers one-on-one, being a supervisor, training a group of guys, or being part of the trainers, training the trainers, right? And helping them learn how to be, supervisors of the brand new guys coming in. And that's where I found my passion for creating my business, Confidence Unchained, working with men one-on-one in that training aspect and getting that immediate feedback. Being a police officer, this, Matt, we don't get a lot of thumbs up. We don't get a lot of, gratitude. It's like, hey, man, you're doing a really good job, or getting that immediate feedback. That I can get that with the men I work with. So for me, that's who I am now. That's a big part of what I get from working with guys one-on-one. But first off, it comes out of my mouth, I have to say father. or who I am, because that's the most important part to me.
I love that. I'm a dad. Got a 20, just turned 23 last couple days ago. My oldest, Rebecca, and my son Andrew's 18,
Hmm.
and it is the single greatest responsibility and reward of my life. To people get weird when I say this, but to create great humans. Like
Sure.
I'm a very intentional guy. Everything I've done in my life is done with purpose and meaning, good or bad. I do shit to ruffle feathers sometimes intentionally. Sometimes I do stuff to sit in the back and be an observer.
Yeah.
But everything I do has a meaning and a purpose behind it. And the greatest one I've ever done in my life is my children. And that was an intentional process my wife and I started 23 years ago when we had our first, with a plan that we were going to be amazing parents and create amazing children and dedicate our lives to that. And
Mm.
there's a lot of arguments, and I don't know if you talk about this with the men that you help, um, about focus on what is the most important part of your life, being is your relationship with your spouse or your significant other, or relationship with your God, or relationship with your children. And I think that answer differs depending on what um, your focus and purpose is.
Sure.
And I think when you have, and I tell my wife this all the time, from day one, I've never doubted she was my forever. Like there's never been a day that I didn't go, I hope this shit works. But like I always just knew,
Sure.
and we both knew that about each other. And we both collectively decided that being a parent was our job and our role together. And that was how our love grew, because we were able to take the things that we were great at individually and make them into a plan, and then put them into our children and make them the best versions of my wife and I.
Yeah.
What, as a father, what is um, your greatest pride and your greatest concern about being a father?
Ooh, those are two great opposite questions, right? My greatest pride is being able to give her some of these tools and techniques and insight that I didn't have growing up. Um, One of the big things that I focus on with her is establishing a good emotional vocabulary, and working with her on being able to handle emotional situations, because that's not something that we're taught in school. That's not something that parents teach us. And so knowing it now, I'm like, oh man, I wish I had this when I was, a young man. So she's 9, and I'm already working on her with some of these techniques. So for me, in seeing her be receptive to it and pick up on it, she's going to be, a little badass when she grows up, and she's going to be able to handle anything that comes her way. I teach her stuff, even micro expressions. I'm still active in teaching interview classes and leadership classes. So I teach her micro expressions, which, by the way, she picks up on faster than any police officer I've ever seen. Maybe it's because she doesn't have that filter that we have for decades. But so whether it's micro expressions or emotional intelligence, the fact that I know that she's going to be better off than I was, um, that's great to me. My biggest concern, man, I'm not sure. Maybe that, some of it won't take hold. Some of the lessons that I've imparted on her, or that, man, I'm not sure. It's that's tough to say. Like, what is my biggest concern? Because what's the normal dad concern? Like, oh, these teenage boys. But no, if I'm training her up enough, she's going to be able to read through the bullshit and go, "You're lying."
Right.
So I'm still waiting for that phone call from her mom one day to go, "What are you teaching her? She keeps telling me that I'm lying," and I'm just going to be like, "We'll stop lying." so so I'm not sure where what a good answer is on the negative side as
We'll
far as
double
a
back on this.
concern.
We'll double
Yeah,
back.
we'll come back.
So I'll give you my greatest pride. So my background's in human behavior and body language. That's my
Mm,
expertise.
I love it.
Growing up with a brother who could speak and was autistic. He was older by almost 3 years, but I was the older brother from the time I was 7 or 8 years old,
Sure.
until he died when I was 18. So unbeknownst to me, I was very um, keenly aware and acutely aware of his wants and needs, and I could decipher what each one was. So much
Mm.
so, my mom would always say, "Stop speaking for him, or he'll never learn to speak on his own." Like those were constant reminders, but my brother couldn't get it out. I could tell without him saying the actual words what he needed and wanted. So I would just say, "Is this what you want?" He would say, "Yes." So I would then ask for it, and it became this almost second nature thing to me.
Mm.
So I do appreciate someone who takes the time to teach their kids the ability to read someone
Yeah.
and to for no other reason other than their own um, personal safety of their heart and their physical safety, right?
Hmm.
And then also for, you know, future relationships, for job interviews, for like all kinds of stuff that this gift that we have as cops, most cops don't know they have it at the level that they have it because they don't intentionally use it to their advantage
Yeah.
um, in ways outside of just daily interactions as a cop. Um, I've sat on Fortune 500 interviews as a body language expert without anybody knowing that I'm the body language expert, reading the opposition and then reporting back to the person who hired me to determine whether or not their intentions were real or if they were being honest when they said this is all they had to offer for this. So I mean, there's so many ways that that gift can be utilized.
Yeah.
And my biggest pride is that my children, um, we as long as you're first of all, and I brag about my kids a lot, but I'm a firm believer if you do things intentionally, you have a better than often shot at being right than you do wrong, right? If you have an
Sure.
intentional plan behind it, you have a better odds to being successful, whatever it is that plan is, than if you don't. My wife was a stay-at-home mom for 16 years. So we sacrificed a lot of financial upside and freedoms and things that come with two households, two incomes in a household. Um, but I think it also gave us the opportunity to really spend a lot of time and training our kids up. My
Yeah.
daughter's the oldest. She's a six-time All-American swimmer and four-time NCAA academic All-American. And I call her my cyborg. She's legit badass. And I don't think there's anything. I don't think anybody's ever going to hurt her because she's just so dialed in. Now, on the flip side of that, she also doesn't know how to back off sometimes. Doesn't know how to turn
Okay.
that dial back.
Sure. Sure.
So we're still working on that part. But when you've been locked in as an elite athlete for as long as she has, it's kind of hard sometimes to turn that dial back a couple notches. And my son is me. My son is the I was a smoke and mirrors kid growing up. I could sell ice to a snowman. I had a photographic memory. I didn't have to remember anything. I just had to memorize it for
Hmm.
the period of time that I needed to memorize it for in order to spit it out, get it out, and then move on. And that was my life in every aspect of my life. So my goal has been identifying that in my son at an early age and flipping that script on him so he doesn't have the same delayed process of maturing
Okay.
and being caught, you know, with my pants down later in life. And I had I had a full ride to the Coast Guard Academy. And because I was so deathly afraid of being outed as a fucking fraud, because I literally wasn't smart. I was just crafty. I
Mm.
was cunning. I could find the back door to anything, but I didn't have knowledge and I didn't know how to study. I didn't have work ethic. I had work ethic when it was paying me, but I didn't
Sure.
have work ethic when it was just in general. And I saw that in my son. So working on that and getting him, holding him accountable and responsible and putting him in positions where he had to rise and prove himself as not the smoke and mirrors kid that I knew that he was heading down the same path I was heading down because he has that gift. Um, and my fear has always been, did I do enough? Did we do enough? Are they ready? Are they prepared?
Yeah.
And did I over push one area and under push another? Like, was my assessment of who they are and where they're going in life preparing them properly? So that's always been my biggest concern is, did I give them everything they needed to be ready?
Yeah.
Training athletes and training cops, same thing. Like you don't
Sure.
want to, if you're doing, I'm a Krav Maga instructor, and very few police departments allow Krav Maga as part of their defensive tactics.
Hmm.
Mine does. Because I wrote the defensive tactics program. But but you have to adapt it obviously within the limits of the law. But
Sure.
having somebody that can defend himself and save his own life or someone else's is important. And you don't want to just go through the motions. You don't want to go through, you know, pressure points and like all the other stuff that they tell you to kick the bag, like the nonsense that was law enforcement training 101 back in the day,
which is still
saving
there.
life.
It's still there being taught, but yeah, luckily that there's people like you and me teaching something different, right?
And it's that, and having that trust, I think, within your department and mine,
Yeah.
That sees something in you as far as a trustability as a instructor, as a person, as someone who's going to know where that line is and how to get everybody trained up to the point where they're not going to get the department sued or individual people sued, right? So
sure.
That's a big responsibility. It's kind of like raising kids and training kids up. So it's all
100%
the same process, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's all the same process, whether you're being a leader, and that's one thing that, you know, it takes a little while for people to realize that aspect, because when we teach, cops these skills, they think that there's like a fine line. It's like, well, do I use these at work, or where else do I use them? It's like everywhere. If you become a better leader, you're going to become a better husband. You're going to become a better father. You're going to become just an all around better communicator. So it's these skill sets, these soft skills, are transferable in every aspect of your life. It's, but sometimes it takes like some pushing for people to realize it. I've had several men come to me for issues in their business and issues in their work life. And then 3 weeks later, they're like, man, my home life has improved. My wife likes me better. I'm interacting better with my kids. And it's like, yeah, that's what happens when you establish a good foundation of emotional intelligence and have that self-awareness that a lot of people don't have.
I think that's a key word now that's real big, I guess, in the last 18 months or so. Emotional intelligence has really become the catch. It's not. And then listen, I am, like we talked about off the air, I'm not a joiner, certainly not a follower, and I certainly do not enjoy copying other people's shit. Like I like to be an innovator. I started a company with a patent on a piece of equipment in fitness that no one else in the world has ever done. And I have 4 patents on it, and I sell this piece of equipment to pro and college teams all across the country.
Sure.
But everybody told me I was fucking nuts. Like, there's no way that'll work. That'll never happen. You'll never be able to do it. And I'm like, giant fuck you is my thing. Like, that's just how I am.
Yeah.
and I don't like the word tribe, and I don't like the word when you get a group of people, masterminds. I don't like mastermind. Like, there's all the catchwords in the speaker, trainer, consulting world, right? That
sure
make me want to vomit. But emotional intelligence actually is what it is. It's not a catchphrase that gets you to buy, for $47.99 you can join. It's not that. It's a real thing that is tangible, and it means something scientific and psychological and even physiological at times.
Yes.
So a lot of people, I don't know. I may have had one guest on that talked about emotional intelligence in the 99 other episodes. Why don't you explain to the listeners about emotional intelligence and how you use that in both your law enforcement and your private business life?
Sure. So the way that we teach it, because you have to have a foundation. You can't skip to the end, right? Like, you have to start off on a certain level, which is, understanding your own emotions. And that starts with having a thorough emotional vocabulary. And the tool that we use, and I still use it today, like I use it every day. I'm looking at it sitting on my desk right here. So it's called the emotional matrix. And it's based off of the 7 universal emotions that we express in the face. And this is something that Dr. Paul Ekman, discovered about micro expressions. Regardless of where you live on this planet, you express these emotions in your face, and it's happiness, sadness, disgust, contempt, anger, fear, and surprise. Okay. And these are experienced in different intensity levels. We can just say high, medium, and low. So we can say a high level anger would be, irate. Moderate level anger would be mad. And maybe a low level anger would be bothered. All three fall under the umbrella emotion of anger, but they're different intensity levels. And what we discovered is that normally we'll give people this card, and it's got the 7 universal emotions on the left, and the rest of it is blank. And we tell people, fill in as many emotional words as you can in all the different areas. So you've got literally 21 different blank areas, and it's like, fill in as many words as you can, and we give them about 5 minutes. How many words do you think they normally come up with, Matt?
Under 30.
Yeah. Like if anyone goes over 10, they're doing great. Like sometimes it's like 5. And so what that shows is that we use the same words over and over again. And we use some words that aren't actually emotional words, like frustrated and concerned. Using frustrated to pinpoint your emotions is like trying to use a shotgun, to pinpoint it. It's like you're hitting multiple things at once. Frustrated could be several different emotions in several different combinations. So this is about establishing that emotional vocabulary first, so you can build from there. So once you start getting versed in this and using this tool, and there's a whole route that we explain people to using it, so you're aware of your emotions. The next level of emotional intelligence is be able to manage your emotions, because you have to identify it specifically. You have to be that sniper. You can't go like, oh, I'm frustrated. No, I'm agitated because of this. I'm worried because of this. I'm anxious because of this. I'm fearful because of this. And the more focused you get, the easier it is for you to process out your emotions when you're stuck. The biggest way we explain this to cops is like, hey, like that last call you were on, like, is it bothering you? Yeah. And do you take it to the next call and take it out on that person, or it's cumulative throughout the day. You're getting all these different emotions that if you don't process them out, then you're bringing that home, to your family. So you literally can take, 5 minutes to process out these emotions that you had from a previous meeting in the day, a previous interaction you had with someone, before you move on to the next one. And then you can be at a clean slate. I use the term your emotional backpack. We like to just stuff stuff in there and carry it around all day. Maybe we're carrying it around for a couple of weeks, and then it's getting heavier and heavier and just draining on us. And sometimes we can carry around this stuff for years, man. Like, I know I had to process stuff out that was like 30 years old. I'm like, holy crap, I didn't know I could do that. That's great. But once you get well versed in this, understanding your own emotions, managing your own emotions, then you start to recognize it in other people. And you're like, okay, this person's upset. This person's bothered. This person's, anxious about something. And you can start picking up on it. And then you can start managing other people's emotions. That's a much higher level. And the way I use it with my daughter, it's a twofold thing. I'm helping manage her emotions, but I'm also giving her some emotional vocabulary. So if I pick up something on her, I'm like, hey, it seems like you're upset about something, or it seems like you're sad about something. I give her those words, because if we don't have that emotional vocabulary, I mean, kids, they don't have a big enough emotional vocabulary, right? So we have to be the ones to help give them those words. And if we hit the nail on the head, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm sad because of this. I'm anxious because of this. The cool thing too is that if you're wrong, it's okay, because then they correct it. They're like, well, no, I'm not sad. I'm just worried because of this here. Great. They identified it, right? A way that I suggest this, because of the high, medium, and low, if you're suggesting an emotion to someone else, never go high. Like, I'd never want to be like, Matt, you look really agitated right now. I want to guess low and give you the ability to change it to higher. Be like, hey, Matt, you look a little upset. You're like, no, I'm not upset. I'm irate because of this going on here. It's like, perfect. I'm glad you corrected me.
Right.
So, and then this detecting deception is, I love this. People really think it's an intellectual skill. It is 100% an emotional skill to be able to detect deception in people. And I think that blows people's minds when you really get into the science behind this. And there's so much science behind detecting deception and understanding emotions, but that's the tip of the iceberg for emotional intelligence and a rudimentary 4-step process into how that works. So
What people don't get is that, and I have a really good friend of mine, Jen Groover, who is an emotional intelligence expert, international speaker, just really, really phenomenal at her job. Different approach than you, I'm sure, but you're all teaching the same theories, just how you deliver it is independent
sure.
to you guys, and how it works for you and your blueprint that you've created to get people to the same place. And I think that's, when I go in and mentor kids, I mentor mostly kids because I can't stand adults for the most part. I don't have the patience to unfuck what's going on there. I'm more of I want to get them while they're still moldable, and hopefully I can fix whatever damage has been done in their 13 years of life and move forward. But knowing what you're good at and what you suck at is real important.
Yeah.
Like having a really firm knowledge of the shit you can do well and the shit you can't do well. And then understanding why.
Mm-hmm.
Is it an effort thing? Is it a patience thing? Is it a talent thing? Is it an IQ thing? Like there's so many different reasons why you may or may not be good at something. And getting kids to understand that and identify it in themselves has always been one of my fortes. And I use disc profiling a lot. I get them to figure out their own disc profile first, and then give them the disc profile to validate their own assessment of themselves. Kind of like their aha, this is what science says, and you just figured it out yourself without having to take a test, which is really cool for parents and stuff like that to see that their child is introspective enough to identify within themselves their personality traits, their things they find value in their life, the type of personality they have. Are they more of a gregarious leadership type? Are they more the wallflower data driven type person? Like understanding who they are is really important. But with the emotional intelligence, it's all taught. Like you can learn everything that you and I do. I didn't go to school for it. I didn't get a training from it. I just lived it, and then realized later in life that, as I was solving crimes at a rate that no one's ever seen, that my ability to quickly process people and make decisions based on that assessment leads me to be able to do things quicker than most people because they have to think about it. Mm-hmm. And I just happen to have this instinctive thing that's been trained into my brain for, I'm going to be 50 in a month. So for a very long time. And, but it's something that can be learned in everybody. And that's, having guys like you that have these programs that allow, and I tell people all the time, the more you can understand who you are, the better. The more deeper you go into who you are and how you got to where you are. And I tell people writing a life story is a really good way of doing that. My brother died when I was 18, and I spent 13 years in depression and doing things, accomplishing things, getting things done, but just angry and hateful and unwilling to love and care and do all the things that you should be able to do as a functioning human being. I wasn't capable of doing because I had this rock in my chest that wouldn't go away, and I knew it was there. So I didn't have the emotional intelligence to figure out the process yet, to figure out how to handle those emotions and handle that grief in a healthy and mature way. And thank God I was able to figure that out. And since 2002, things have been different. And that's an 18-year journey now that I've been on of emotional and spiritual enlightenment and understanding way more than I ever thought I knew. Understanding how energy, vibrations, all those things that they come into play when it comes to understanding emotions, and how everything is an energy and everything is through vibrations. And understanding, they say if you walked in a room, like, man, you could cut the tension with a knife. Well, there's a reason for that. That's the vibration, that energy that your energy is picking up on. And I think teaching people how to have that skill set at a young age is vital. And we talked about, I don't know if you said it in the beginning or not, where they don't do that in schools.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of shit they don't do in schools.
Oh,
and
yes.
Most of it has to do with individualism. There's very little individualism. There's there's very little individualism as far as the curriculum, and there's very little opportunity for leadership development. I've written multiple leadership development programs for schools and have been thrown out of schools every time I go. Now, mind you, it might be my way of delivering my message, which is intentionally to shock them. But
Sure.
nobody wants an outsider coming in saying there's a lacking in leadership development in their school. But all you have to do is look at the school and look at the programming and look at how schools in general are essentially box builders. Everybody
Yes.
goes into a box. You have to find a box. You have to find a box. And there's no way of connecting the boxes. There's no program that takes the boxes of, whether you're in special education or college prep or general education or your baseball, football, whatever, ski club, band, chorus, whatever. Everybody gets a box, but there isn't cross-pollination. There isn't a way that the appreciation of each other occurs outside of if you want to go watch that sport or watch that whatever. There's no way to do that within the school context, the framework of the school.
Sure.
And I think we're sending people into the world unprepared.
Yeah, 100%.
And then you are benefiting from the fact that these people aren't prepared, because at least they are recognizing their shortcoming and they're willing to seek help in adapting something new into their life that helps them become more successful or whatever they're looking for.
Well, you know what? It's funny though, because I still think that, a lot of the men I've worked with, they're not aware of the main problem. Because like I said, the majority of the men that have come to me, it's been for like working on, accountability, discipline, the mental toughness side of things, right? No one to this date has come to me to work on their emotional intelligence. But I give it to them on the backside because I know that that's the problem. Right. They're like, hey, I want to work on this. I want to work on being a better leader and, being more assertive, being a better boss all the way. I'm like, cool, great. Got some things we're going to work on. We work on the emotional intelligence. They're like, oh my gosh, not only is work better, but, my home life is better. I love sharing this story. It was a guy I worked with. It was only like 3 weeks after working together, but again, he came to me to work on his business. He felt like his employees were kind of bullying him and kind of, he was being too easy at work. He said, man, I need to get back to being that alpha male and being the real boss. I'm like, okay, well, we're going to work on some things. And a couple of weeks after working together, he shared a story with me. He said, the other day I was cooking breakfast for my family, his wife and daughters. And he said, while he's cooking breakfast, he hits his head on the vent above his stove. He's like, man, I hit it freaking hard, man. He's like, normally I'd lose my shit. He's like, I'd be throwing the pan across the room. I'd be punching the wall. So right after he hit his head, he looked at his family and they were bracing for the storm.
Right.
They're like, oh, Dad's about to lose it. Crap. Maybe it's going to be a while before we eat breakfast now, so they're bracing themselves. He said he walked over to the wall, pretended to punch it, and then went back to cooking. And he said his wife walked over and was like, hang on a minute. What's going on? This isn't how you normally act. And he said, I'm done pretending. He's like, all that crap I was doing before, throwing a fit and just getting mad and being mad for minutes and hours. He's like, that was all crap. That was all pretending. He's like, I'm done with that. He's like, no more. So he says wife gave him a big hug. The daughters came over. And the funniest part is after that, his wife would bug him and be like, hey, when you get on a phone call with Justin again? I like this new version of you.
Right.
Let's keep this up. When's your next phone call? And so he didn't even come to me. He never mentioned that his home life had any issues, that he had any issues with relationship with his family, his wife or his kids. But, working on the leadership aspect changed his home life completely.
Leadership doesn't come up in a conversation on my podcast in a specific way like this. I've had celebrities on. I've had parents have grieving from losing a child. I've had everybody in between, but everybody's got something important to share. And leadership as as a specific topic really hasn't come up too many times. And if it did, I never asked this question, I don't think. I have my own definition of leadership. I know what it means to me, but I'm always curious from another leader, what is your definition of leadership?
To be able to guide people and to have them learn to take over for you one day.
You're always training a replacement.
Yeah, always. Right. Even your kids, they're your replacement in the world.
So my leadership definition that I came up with for kids, and mind you, everything is sculpted around what can a kid grasp and understand. Fifth grade's kind of the youngest that I work with, and getting them to understand. Because you say, what's a leader? They're like Barack Obama or the president or a general or a cop or a teacher. Like it's all very title driven, not action driven, right? So I always say leader is someone who is willing to give up their time, energy, and effort without wanting something in return to help someone else find success. So that's kind of what I believe for a kid, that they can always, because then I say, okay, if you have a friend that's been picked on, they're like, yeah. And I said, did you like remove them from that situation so they wouldn't get picked on anymore? Like, yeah, well, I said that you didn't ask for anything. You sacrifice yourself to put yourself in between them, and you help them find success. And success in that moment was not getting picked on. Yeah. Like having those, and then you have them start connecting the dots on what all that means and how they can use it in different areas of their life. And it still works as an adult. When people ask me, who am I? My first word I always come out was a servant. I'm a servant. I've been a servant for 32 years. And even longer than that, if you count my brother and all the other kids that I've helped in my neighborhood when I was growing up. And I always wanted to serve. And I may not enjoy being a cop anymore because of the climate and just the changes in the world and how law enforcement is no longer appreciated the way it used to be. And everybody wants to get you in trouble for something. There's this, it's almost like you're being punked every day, right? It's like you're waiting on it. So, but I still want to serve, and I just find different ways to serve. And I think when people realize that leadership isn't necessarily this level of attainment that requires X, Y, and Z within your DNA in order to be the very best leader. Sure. That if they break it down to its very simplest form and then replicate that many, many times a day, I'm like, it's the greatest drug there is. Yeah. When you help people, it is the greatest drug ever created. And there's no one ever going to say, hey, don't do that shit. It's bad for you. Right. So you can do it as many times as you want, not be called a junkie. It's great. I said, and if you're doing it because it makes you feel good, I'm not here to hate on you. Like, yeah. It feels good. And it feels good to make someone else's day better. And I think, I always tell people my greatest gift is I can unfuck anything in about 5 minutes. You give me 5 minutes, I'll unfuck it. And because that's just my gift. And my goal is to solve your problem to the best of my ability, to the best of your satisfaction in about 5 minutes. And people are like, how the hell did that happen? Like, you got to be willing to take those risks and identify moments when I'm going to seize this. I had a kid the other day was suicidal, and he's got every depression, bipolar, borderline personality disorder, you name it. So 19 years old, and they wanted him committed, and I'm like, well, let's work on this for a second. We have in Pennsylvania, I can commit you if I believe that you're a danger to yourself or others, and that's a 72-hour thing, and it stays permanently with you that you've been committed, and there's a lot of ramifications for that if you're a 19-year-old kid. And I could tell that's not what he wanted. And I asked him, he was there once before, and I said, what was that like? He said, it was hell on earth. I said, okay. You stopped taking your meds 2 weeks ago. That was a choice you made because you didn't like the way it made you feel. So instead you decided to do LSD and weed. I get it. You're trying to find a different way to get to the same place, which is you're not going to be having these moments. I said, well, here we are. You're trying to kill yourself, and we're here. And I gave him a little bit of control. I could sense that he wanted to have a say. But within a box that I had to put him in. Listen, your say is you're going to have a say, but the say isn't we're doing nothing. The say isn't I'm leaving and mom and dad leave you alone and you get to just do whatever the hell you want. They gave him a sliver of hope that he had a say in something. And what normally would take an hour or 2 hours was pretty much a 5-minute deal. I had him convinced to commit himself to do a voluntary commitment at the hospital in the psych ward instead of being involuntary committed at our psychiatric ward, which
Sure.
is a government run facility. And he did it. He's like, I just wanted to have a say. And I could just sense that, like, just something about it was, I don't feel like I'm in control of anything.
Sure.
And when you give someone that ability to control an outcome in their life, and you teach them that process like you do, how to control outcomes, just like you said, what was meant for, business turned into a relationships, turned into parenting, turned into everything because you gave them a chance to have control of an outcome.
Sure.
And a lot of times there's multiple touch points to one process. And I think that's what people get tied, in the weeds real easy. So guys like us, we thrive in chaos. And that's where we do our best work. And what seems like all hell is breaking loose. Like 2020, I have had the greatest blood pressure and resting heart rate in 2020 of my lifetime. I thrive in it. When I'm quiet, that's when everything goes haywire in my head. When I'm in the mix of shit, I'm golden. What about you?
Yeah, I like that idea because I think I've always put myself in those higher risk situations, being on the SWAT team and always wanting to be part of something different and having to figure things out, being in investigations. It's like, okay, let's keep my brain moving because like you said, when it's quiet time, sometimes when it's time to go to bed and it's like, zzz, it's like, oh man, I don't need all this stuff going on right now. And it's interesting to see that because you have to be productive and I've at least luckily having the emotional intelligence allows you to laugh at yourself sometimes because there's times I'm laying in bed and my mind's going a million miles an hour and I start laughing because I'm like it sucks, I'm not gonna get a lot of sleep tonight, but like I'm up taking notes, like I dictate notes in my phone a lot, so when my mind's going I'm like, all right, here's some more notes. All right, here's some more notes. And I'm like, can this just stop? Like these are great ideas and everything, but like I really want to get some sleep. So I like how you pointed that out. Controlling the chaos and being in the mix of it, because those are the times when you see everyone freak out, and they look at you like, why are you so calm? Like shit's hitting the fan right now. Everything's going bad. It's like, no, it's good. We're gonna figure it out. We're gonna push through it. You got to lean into it. Everyone else is running away from it, so you gotta lean into whatever that emotion is. I was, talking to a newer officer today, and giving him some insight on fear and how you need to lean into it rather than resisting it, because that's the stigma, right? We're not supposed to be afraid. Cops don't get scared. I'm like, the only reason cops don't get scared are they're too stupid to get scared, or they're lying to themselves. Those are the only two scenarios that you're not getting scared when your life is on the line, right? So it's lean into it, use those emotions as fuel. Tony Bloward talks about that a lot in his No Fear, KNOW. You got to lean into that fear and use it as actual fuel to accomplish whatever mission is in front of you.
People don't recognize. And the only reason I bring this up is you mentioned lean into it and then fear and talking to cops. So I made it to the finals of a TEDx talk. I made the top 30. They took 25. In the top 30, I had to do live 5-minute auditions in front of an audience.
Sure.
And the theme for the TEDx was chaos.
Hmm.
And which is what brought me when I was looking through different TEDx's in the area, and that was why I'm like, oh shit, yeah, that's totally me. So, and I know that Matt Cubbler, is not necessarily your typical TEDx kind of guy. Like my vernacular can go from, I can talk to a Fortune 500 guy about anything, but I can guarantee it, any meeting I'm ever in a fuck's going to drop. It's happening. I don't have, that's just, I grew up in a home, and my single parent home with my mom who worked 3 jobs, is my idol, my warrior princess. I love her. We were allowed to say fuck. Because I was little. As long as we didn't say fuck you, we could say fuck. We could say, man, I had a fucking hard day today. I was like 9. So I mean, it's been part of my life since I was little. And I just don't, and it's so, people expect it from me now. Like it's not, it's like the and what or and when I'm speaking. But so anyways, I did this TEDx, and it's very hard to do 5 minutes without saying fuck, but I did it. And my speech was on what it's like the moment you're pulling back on the trigger to take somebody's life and the lead up to that moment. So that's what the 5 minutes was. And understanding the chaos that goes through. And it was during the heat of, this was 2017, 18. So right in, everything was going ape shit, and cops were beginning, it was all the peak of the Black Lives Matter movement, and all the shootings that were being highlighted, and everything. So I was trying to explain in this 5-minute presentation for TEDx what it's like to be a cop. And like, for the most part, you have 6 months in the academy, you have 6 to 12 months with an FTO, and then you're on your own, right? Then, I said, then you got to go to every call, and you got to handle the call perfectly, because the person that dialed 911 doesn't get to pick whether or not they get the 30-year guy or the 18-month guy, right? They don't get to pick that guy.
Yeah.
You get what you get when you dial 911, and we don't get to pick the calls we go to. And it's the only profession outside of the military where your fight or flight is ignored. In the most chaotic moment, when every other human being has the desire to lock the door and not go, you got to get out and go, because that's what you do. And it's not, when we make mistakes, and we do as cops, we're not perfect. Again, I go back to the 18 months of potential training. That's from street to squad car on your own.
Yeah.
Compared to any other profession that has a life or death component to it. It's woefully inadequate, the amount of time that's spent to be prepared to handle this job. When you're making that decision to take someone's life, it is not because you hate them, or that you're angry, or that you have racism or bigotry or anything in your heart. None of that ever comes in. I've been in 2 shootings, and I've spoken to many people who have been. Never once did they think, I hate this person, or if this person's black, or this person's Chinese, or this person's white, or any of those things. It's, I don't want to fucking do this.
Yes.
But I got to do this. Mm-hmm. And that moment, the only thing that you're having course through your veins is fear and doubt. And yet you still have to make that choice. And I didn't get selected. I lost to the Indian from the Village People, was one of the guy that would be Indian, was ended up becoming one of the TEDx speakers, and his speech sucked. But I didn't get picked. And I think it was because of the climate of what was going on and the topic I chose. But I can tell you, I got 4 or 5 judges send me personal emails saying, you're never going to get picked, but that was the best one tonight. Because TEDx doesn't want that.
Sure.
They want high education, high level thinking, high level, not emotional, real raw shit.
It's interesting, like the way that you described it, like, it's so true. I've never had to pull the trigger, but I know I've had 2 times to where, one, I couldn't get to my gun. The very first time I couldn't get to my gun to pull the trigger. The second time I'm pulling slack out and then change my mind. Yeah, so it's definitely a lot of chaos beforehand. I clearly remember the first time I decided I needed to shoot someone and I couldn't. But all the chaos going in your mind beforehand, your mind, there's so many thoughts that happen in a very short period of time. It's almost like this time dilation happens, right? And numerous thoughts run through your mind. Yeah, you got me kind of running the reel in my head, man.
I was SWAT for 11 years. So, and then I was an air marshal after 9/11 and trained in a tube for 4.5 years. And I got a lot of trigger time in my life, and understanding, like, people don't get, like, I try to explain it to them. There's the people that get tunnel vision that aren't aren't dialed in and don't have the ability to be in chaos and still see everything.
Sure.
Well, I tell people, for me, in the two shootings I was in, and I'm trying to remember the movie, The Legend of Bagger Vance, I think it was with um, Matt Damon was the golfer, and I
Okay.
forget who the black guy was. It was like the golf guy, and he was
Wasn't
just
it Will
famous.
Smith or
Yeah, it was
something?
Will Smith. It was. You're right.
Okay.
But there was one scene where there's all the people lined up on the tee box, and then all of a sudden they disappeared, and it goes quiet, and you could see everything, and he hit the ball straight. And because in my head, when I look at golfers, I'm like, I know for damn certain the first person to the right is getting his teeth knocked out with a golf ball. Like, that's happening. The minute I swing, it's shanking to the right, and someone's losing an eye or teeth. And I always am fascinated by how they're able to do that. And you talk to any golfer, it's all of a sudden everything goes blank and everything gets quiet in their brain. And they get this like peace, this focus. And I remember the one shooting I was in, I was watching the rounds come out of my gun and counting them while on target, counting the rounds. And because I talked to many people who, they're like, how many rounds? Like, I have no idea. I just kept pulling the trigger until it stopped. I knew I fired 12 rounds. And they're like, you sure? I'm like, yeah, check my gun. 12 rounds. I counted them all. And in my head, I could still watch them ejecting. And
Yeah.
that's that. When I would go on a SWAT call, when we'd hit a house on a drug house, I could tell you in the rooms that I went in what pictures were where. Like what was on the end table, like shit like that was in that chaos in the mix of everything. I'm seeing everything and it's getting
Sure.
cataloged. I may not be going, I'm looking at that, look at that, but it's getting cataloged. And I think that's when people talk about being like us and thriving in chaos, that's what happens. Things get slowed down. When I'm quiet, things get sped up.
Yeah.
It's the opposite. It's the inverse. And that's the crazy thing that, little people that aren't watching that are here. That's a little Jameson's on ice right there for me to help calm the day down.
Yeah.
I don't highly recommend that, but it works for me and makes the podcast way more fun.
It is interesting. Yeah. When you enter those flow states, it's an interesting thing to see. And I, right when you said like the people that get the tunnel vision, I tell a story about a guy I was on the SWAT team with too. He didn't last on the team very long because he couldn't handle the stress. I know he was the breacher before I took over as the breacher, and I clearly remember two separate occasions where he ran to the wrong house because the adrenaline spiked and he was so resistant to it that he short circuited and he couldn't handle it. And I remember hopping off the truck in slow motion, watching him run the wrong way and go, that's weird. He shouldn't be going that way, and continuing on, this way. I'm like, well, we're heading to the back of the house. And you get there and it's like, oh, I remember where he went. He did not come where he needed to go. So, we're delayed breaching the back of the house. And yeah, so we had to have a conversation about that. But that's someone that I believe is really just resistant to the fear. They're like, I shouldn't be afraid. It's not good to be afraid. I'm not a man if I'm afraid. And so they're fighting it. But I think you mentioned it earlier in the show. It's a physiological sensation. Like we feel emotions in our body before our cognitive brains, take hold of it. So if you're fighting this emotion, there's this disconnect between your brain and your body. So his body was like, run, dude. The fear. And he's like, no, I need to do so. But you get the guys that are dialed in and like own the fear, own the emotion. It's like, you get that nervous energy, on your way to a house and you're just like, you're shaking. You're in the back of the truck and you're just like, you're amped and you're like, okay. And you're going through all the things that could go wrong. Hey, I'm worried that there's going to be more people in the house than we planned for. Like, what if there's a dog in the yard? What if when I hit this door, it doesn't breach the first time through,
Reinforced on the other side with a
yeah, I'm like, oh man, because I for the longest time I had a record of every door I hit was one hit, and I was like, oh man, if I hit it twice, that's a failure, right? Like all this stuff going on. So yeah, you have to lean into it. I think that's the most important thing, to own the emotions, identify them, whatever they are coming up for you. They're not right or wrong. There's no such thing as a good or bad emotion. This is something that's, I think it's very misconstrued. We can go back to the emotional matrix. Out of the 7 emotions, really happiness is the only positive one. You can say surprise could be happy. It could go either way, right? But the rest of them are considered negative emotions. I don't believe that. Emotions are either useful or not useful based on the context of the situation. So it's a tough one for some people to swallow, though. But we've all been cut off in traffic, right?
Mhm.
Everybody. I mean, 99%. You get cut off in traffic. What happens? Fear gets triggered. You hit the brakes, you swerve the wheel, you avoid the accident. If you had to think about it, go, oh, here comes a car. I should slam on the brakes. I should turn the wheel. You would have gotten the accident. So the fear triggers a response. Your body reacts from muscle memory, and you avoid the accident. What gets triggered next?
Anger.
Anger. You son of a bitch. What, you cut me off. You shouldn't, like. So that anger in the car after that, is that useful? No, it's not useful. The fear was useful. The fear saved you from getting in an accident, but now the anger that's triggered afterwards, that's not useful. But if you're getting mugged on the side of the road, the fear and anger would both be useful to fight off your attacker. And just like if you're in the back pew at a funeral laughing your ass off, happiness is not useful in that context.
Right.
So it's all about, is it useful or not?
Let me ask you this: in your professional life, do you have anybody coming to you with grief issues, having to manage grief, or is everybody trying to become a level? To use one of the terms I want to vomit over, trying to level up or 10x their life, like, or what is the like? Are you working the gamut, or are you working only with high achievers?
Normally it's high achievers. I have talked to some people, dealing with grief, but that's not the norm.
What is your because I have deep thoughts on it, on trauma, on the value of trauma, and how um, properly managing trauma and utilizing it as a positive after the fact.
Mhm.
Have you ever had any moments where you've had to help people with that?
None that come to mind, but I think you're getting to a really good point, because we learn a lot from trauma that we've been through. It goes into the idea of any failure, right? We learn more from those failures that we handle. The traumas that we deal with in our life, it shows us the limits that we can be pushed to and not break. And so I'm curious your take on it, but it's definitely, you think about all the people in the world that are out there doing stuff, that are out there helping others. They've all gone through some type of trauma, and there's like, I don't want someone else to go through this. Let me help you. I know how to get out of this faster. I don't want you to be depressed for 5 or 10 years because of this incident you went through. Let me share my story and how I got out of it. And in that way, they're almost still continuing to heal themselves. People that have been through that type of trauma.
Yeah, it's a so I'm a firm believer, and this is something just through my own life that I've had to deal with that helped me, and I it's been the basis of my speaking and mentoring and just helping people sort of um, run the gamut of life with a little bit more success rate than they would otherwise. But I believe you need to know what your very best looks like and your very worst.
Hmm.
I believe you need to know what the bottom feels like and the top feels like, because you're going to fool yourself thinking that you're at the very worst many
Mm-hmm.
times over in your life. Never going to get any worse than this. My boyfriend just broke up with me. It's no blah blah blah. Like, you're always your emotional reaction doesn't, the context doesn't fit the reaction, right? But in your experience, this is the worst thing that happened, right? Up
Sure.
until my 13 years of living, this was the worst. Until my 21st, whatever. People that don't experience like heart wrenching trauma, whether it's a loss of a sibling or a parent or a loved one that was super close to you, um, I don't believe you appreciate life as much without it. I think it's impossible to
Mm-hmm.
truly understand the value of life if you've never experienced death. You may think you do. You may pretend that you have that understanding. Now, as cops, I've seen thousands of dead people all through this week. Like, it just, death doesn't bother me when it's not mine. Like, it's very procedural for me. When I see someone with their head off, it's not, oh my God, someone died, I can't handle it. It's, where's the brain? Where's the body? Rest of, I'm trying to identify parts to collect a crime scene. That's a very procedural thing. But until you've experienced that traumatic loss in your life, you're never going to know how bad your soul and heart can hurt and how your brain can follow down a path of destructive behavior if you don't learn how to manage that properly. If you don't have the tools or someone there that can help you manage that and give you those tools. And conversely, you need to know what your very best looks like. And I'll give you an example. For me, the very worst was my brother dying. I can't imagine another pain worse than that, simply because of the suddenness of it and his vulnerability as he was the most perfect, kindest, didn't deserve that at all on any level. And that was what angered me the most was, I was a pot dealing semi-convict, semi-hero, borderline between the two at times. And I felt very guilty about living. So that was definitely my worst. But I decided after I wrote the book, I had set up some charities in my brother's name for kids with disabilities. And the first couple of years, the book sold enough to keep these. It was at a private school that helped pay for tuition for kids that had special needs. But then the book wasn't selling, so I'm like, all right, fuck. I'm going to be the guy that started something and can't keep it going. So I saw some guy riding across the country on a bike to raise money for whatever he was doing. I'm like, I hate riding bikes. What could I do that's like that kind of magnitude that would draw attention and make people give a shit? So I decided to run across the state of New Jersey. I have a rheumatoid arthritis. I'm not supposed to be doing any type of that kind of shit. And I decided to do it anyways, and I ran 78.8 miles in 72 hours. And I broke 6 bones in my feet, had a seizure, full body seizure at mile 40. Ran 3 marathons in 3 consecutive days is what it came out to. And every part of me broke. Like I was completely stripped down emotionally, physically, mentally by the time I finished. Couldn't finish my speech. My wife had to finish it for me. I just couldn't get the words out. And I'd never been more tired and more depleted in my life, but more cured and happy, because I realized that everything that I thought I couldn't do, I did. Every step I took where I thought I couldn't take another step, I did. I didn't walk one step, I ran every one of them. My feet were the size of thighs. I couldn't tie my shoes when I was done because I'd broken so many bones in my feet just from the pounding. The most I'd ever run before running 78 miles was 23 miles in 1 week in training, because I knew I couldn't train to run 78 miles or else I would have never made it to the run. Sure. So I said, I'm going to do it one time. I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And I got to, you don't have plan B. Plan A is the only option. So I had 1 p.m. I had to be at someplace at a ceremony, and I was running in there and I was escorted. Funny side note, I hadn't talked to this person since that day. I was on local Philly TV on a sports radio, on a sports like panelist show. A friend of mine was a host, so he got me on to talk about the run. And this guy, he's Marine reservist at a local air base in Philadelphia, saw it and got a bunch of guys together, and they escorted me in the last 8 miles. They ran with me. We ran in formation to the end. And I hadn't seen these guys since that day. And I got this email out of nowhere from the guy that organized it saying, I thought about you today. I just want to tell you you're still an inspiration to me, blah, 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 blah. So 13 years later, this guy reaches out to me. But until you know those apexes and the trenches that you can go down to, I think trauma is a very key component to emotional intelligence and to overall success and appreciation of life. And it's tough for people in, sadly, my kids have experienced trauma, but I think they're better for it. I think their resiliency quotient is much higher. And I think getting people to understand, and probably more so in your line of work than mine, to understand that absent that, there's going to be something, there's a level they don't know about yet,
Yeah.
and I think that everybody's going to have that. We don't go through life without it. We're all dying,
Yeah.
and we're all going to lose somebody we love. And I think getting people to understand that when that hits, to be how to prepare for it and how to be um, to manage it in a healthy way using their emotional intelligence, I think is key to recovery and then growth.
Sure. Yeah.
You had any issues with, or anybody come to you with any like that, or any personal in your own life that helped you um, battle through that?
I haven't dealt with any major trauma in my life. My biggest thing was, a loss of my own identity. You know, um, like I lived and breathed the job. Like that's who I was. It's like, like, if you would have asked me the question, who was Justin Atherton, the first thing out of my mouth would have been like, I'm a cop, I'm a, detective, I'm a SWAT team. Like that's what my answer would have been. But that's not who I am anymore. And so I actually, the first agency I worked for, I was forced to resign because of alleged insubordination. So it had nothing to do with my job on the street. It was all in-house stuff. And going through that process, like, broke me down. Like, to me, that was trauma. That was the loss of my identity, right? I'm sitting here going, I'm not gonna be able to be a cop again. Like, what am I gonna do? Like, I've never thought about doing anything else. Like, this is, something I thought I would die doing. It's like, who am I? And, I struggled with that for a while. I was in depression. I started drinking. I was like, this is not good. The self-destructive behavior was going on during that period of time. And all of a sudden this light bulb came on and was like, hang on a second. Look at the skills I've collected along the way. Look at these tools and techniques I can use. It's like, man, I can do whatever the fuck I want. And I'm like, damn. I'm like, even if I'm not the police anymore, I'm like, you put me in any situation, I'm going to kick ass. And it's like, holy crap. I was like, I'm okay. I'm going to be all right, and able to get back into it, working for a different agency. It gave me a new perspective. Even just with the job itself, man, like nothing was a big deal anymore. It was like, okay, look, we're going to figure it out. We're going to deal with it. I completely changed the way I interacted with people. Now I just laugh at everybody. To me, everything's funny now. It's like nothing's a big deal. It took the guys I worked with a little while to get used to that. They're like, dude, you just laugh at everybody, especially when they get upset. I'm like, it's funny. It's hilarious to me now because I see the repetitive behavior. It's like, all right, these buttons were pushed on this person, so they're going to react in this exact way. And I know exactly what's about to come out of their mouth. So to me, it's like, to me, it was funny. And so it definitely doesn't help de-escalate right off the bat when you laugh at somebody. But after a little while, when they realize, it's like, dude, after the conversation goes on for a little bit, and it's like, see, man, I was laughing because I knew this wasn't that big of a deal. We were able to figure it out. I'm like, do you think I was being rude to you? Well, I guess not. I'm like, okay, good. So you have a good day and carry on. But so.
And then you follow up with it's probably going to happen again. So
yeah. I don't use, I try, I always follow, have a great day, be safe, drive safe, whatever. I try not to instigate that stuff again. But to me, I get humor out of the job now because it's funny pushing those buttons. But I learned a lot from the loss of that. And now I know that I'm okay without it. Like if tomorrow they said, yeah, we don't want you, here anymore, I'd be like, okay, I'll figure it out.
Right.
And it's not going to break me. And so I don't look forward to the day where I do suffer some legitimate loss. Like that's going to be tough. A good friend of mine recently, her mother died, and she has, been dealing with a lot of grief and drinking and self-destructive behavior. And she's just now getting to where like she's leaving the house. It's been, several weeks, maybe a couple months, so I don't want to have to deal with that. I know I'll be able to get through it, but it's not going to be fun. But I know that the tools and techniques I've collected along the way will help me with that process, will help me with that grief process. So,
And I think that's a big part is having. I didn't have the tools
yeah,
to handle my brother's death.
sure.
Like I
Yeah.
said, I had faked it till I made it all my life, and then wham, I get kicked in the face with the biggest shock of my life and the worst trauma I could ever imagine. And then a month later, I left for the army. So it was like I didn't even have a chance to. A month after that, I'm in the Gulf War. A year after that, I'm in the Gulf War. So it was like
Yeah.
I didn't have a chance to grieve. And
Process.
then
Yeah.
I got out, became a cop, threw myself right into every fucked up situation you could possibly think of, and got married and had a kid right after we got married, and like everything was just boom, 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 and I never allowed myself a chance to stop and be quiet, so that I was forced to handle it.
Yeah.
And I just kept myself constantly overstimulated so that it suppressed all of that. And I just think and the reason why I asked that is because the people that you're helping with your business, whether they know it or not, and whether they've had trauma or not, the tools you're giving them will be the blueprint for recovery.
Yeah.
Because it's the same process. It's all about knowing yourself, knowing what's good or bad, and knowing what's productive or not productive, or what's appropriate or not appropriate. Like those are all the same processes of emotional intelligence, goes into every box you can possibly think of.
Yes.
And that's the
100%.
value. And that's why I don't get vomity when I think of the word emotional intelligence, like I do every other sticky word that's out there in our business.
Sure. Sure.
And that's, for me, it's good to have a conversation with somebody who's in that business. And I purposely did not go. I've had many opportunities to start doing similar type stuff, using my skills and monetizing those in a more civilian type world. And I just can't, until I can figure out my thing that is unique to me, that I'm not, using someone else's verbiage or blueprint,
Sure.
and I can figure out my thing, I'm not doing it because I can't. I would end up quitting because I'd be like,
That's fair.
I can't even watch this off of me anymore.
That's fair.
This feeling of, but yeah. So, and it's kind of, I look at that kind of like politics for me. Like when I look at, a friend of mine, John Runyon. I don't know if you know the name John Runyon. He was an Eagles right tackle for a very long time.
Yeah.
Dirtiest player in the NFL, who happens now as the vice president of player conduct for the NFL. The dirtiest player is now the one doling out punishment for people that break the rules. Anyways, good buddy of mine was a one-term representative, U.S. House representative out of New Jersey. And he's a guy who's got the name. He's 6'9". Nobody's gonna mess with him, right? He's just a giant human being. I'm like, and he didn't run for re-election. I'm like, why didn't you run? He goes, I couldn't get the stench off me every day. And that's the way I feel with a lot of things in life. Like I couldn't do it because I wouldn't be able to get that stench off me. It's not authentic to me. And you led with that, that loyalty and authenticity. Those are all key words in my life. And I can't fake it. Matt Cubbler pre-1989. Yeah, dude, I was all in. I could fake it and tell me you need me to be that. I'm that. Whatever you need me to be. I couldn't do that again. Like I have to be authentic. I have to be me. I can't put a charade or a facade up to hide who I am.
Sure.
People say I'm a lot, too much sometimes, they say. And I'm okay with that. I'm not for everybody. But I would rather be that than be inauthentic and then have somebody figure out that I'm really too much.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Let's talk about you have a summit coming up.
Yes. Yeah. It's actually, it's this Thursday, the 25th, 26th, and 27th. It's a 3-day event. Getting to interview a lot of amazing men. You mentioned Lucas at the beginning. Lucas is going to be in the summit. He's an amazing guy. You familiar with Tony Blauer?
I do. I know.
Yeah. I talked to, we're going to do a talk for a long time. Tony Blauer is going to wrap up the summit at the end of the day. Awesome guy. A lot of other great speakers on there. I get Mike DeCop is going to be on there. I'm talking with him, Johnny Elsasser, Jim Vave, Eric Partaker, the huge list. And it's based on, my three, pillars that I talk about in my business, either mental toughness, emotional fortitude, or health awareness. So there's fitness guys in there. There's emotional intelligence experts. There's, mental toughness guys. Brad Lee, he's been all over the place now. I get a chance to, he has a podcast, Dropping Bombs, but he's all over the place. So I get to chat with him too. A lot of great men. It's a free event. If you get a chance to check it out, the website's summit.confidenceunchained.com.
Now, what is the if somebody was watching this podcast, like, I really dig Justin, I love his vibe. What is it that you would, if I'm calling cold call and I'm like, hey Justin, I'm interested in what you do, what is your process for getting someone to understand on that, whatever 30-minute call, 15-minute call, whatever your initial fact-finding phone call is? How do you assess someone, whether is it a compatibility thing? Is it like, what do you look for when you're bringing on a client?
Sure. Yeah. It has to be compatibility. And I've talked about this with some other people. Like, I pass up on a lot of clients. Like, I have to want to work with you. And I'm pretty blunt. Maybe it hasn't come across too much in this, but maybe it's from the job, right? It's like, I'm going to tell you when you're messing up and how you're messing up, and saying, this is not aligning with the goals that you told me that you have. So you either need to change your behavior or you need to change your goals. And so I'm very direct, talking about the DISC method. Direct is the way that I communicate, right? I don't like beating around the bush. I use a lot of the content analysis to, point out people when they're lying to themselves. Don't tell me you're going to try to do something or plan to do something, that you want to do something. And a lot of people can't handle that. And I'm okay with that. I have other coaches I will send you to. I'll be like, hey, you need a little extra sugar on your advice? I got the person for you, right? I don't come with any sugar. You're drinking your coffee black, if you're talking to me. So there has to be a compatibility. And I think even in my questionnaire, I asked, do you get offended easily? Because I will not work with people that get offended easily. I did early on as a coach, and it took a lot of extra energy to recover from, me offending them. Well, I took offense to what you said here. I'm like, I am just pointing out my observations of what I'm seeing and how it doesn't align with what you want for your life. I mean, you want me to say it in a softer way? So the compatibility is a huge part for me, because I want to have to, I want to work with, people that are motivated to do things and become successful in whatever that looks like, because success is different for all of us, right? But personal life, business life. So the conversation is crafted differently. Just like you said, your podcast is crafted differently. You can't start out with a list of questions and go, I'm going to ask these 25 questions in this call. No, it's what's going on and where does it go from there, right? I may come back with some more directed questions, but you know how it goes, Matt.
Let me ask you, and I'm going to ask you this because we're two top guys. We're both coming from the same space. We have similar unique talents. Are you a planner or are you a wing it?
Oh man, it both depends on what it is. Am I giving a speech? I'm going to wing it. I got bullet points and I'm going to freaking just flow. Is it a vacation? I'm going to plan the hell out of it. My girlfriend loves the planning side of the vacation, but I like being able to wing it too, man. I feel like you can almost do both, right? You can plan a structure like, I want to stay within these parameters. Everything else in the middle, I'm going to figure it out.
Yep. Because and the reason I asked that question is because you kept saying, we'll figure it out, we'll figure it out, we'll figure it out. That's been your thing. So the reason why I asked that, that's why. So I am your quintessential. My planning is just simply, the only plan I have is, when do I work at the police work, right? Okay. And then how do I fit everything else around it?
Okay.
So sometimes I do it while I'm doing both. Like sometimes I'm multitasking, not a lot, but there is, I have to figure out how. My only planning is if I have my 100 hours a week that I work, where are they at?
Sure.
And that's sort of blocked out, but everything else is in my life is a fucking winging. Like, I've never written a speech. I've given 2-hour speeches where I literally didn't have a single thing written down.
Hmm.
And I sit and read the room. I kind of know my topic,
Sure. Sure.
right? But I don't really know how it's going to go.
I
And
hate,
and
I
I
hate
love that. I love that
reading.
surprise at the end. Like, even on the podcast, like, we had no, and I told you from the very beginning, there's no plan here.
Sure.
You ask the one question, we're going to figure it out. I didn't do any research on you. I knew you had that business, that you're coaching men and you're a cop. That's pretty much the knowledge that I had.
Yeah.
Didn't even know you were still a cop. As a matter of fact, when you told me in the beginning, you're like, yeah, I said, really? Okay, roll on. So I like the fact that you're a wing it, but a wing it with a skill set, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're a wing it and you have no fucking idea what you're doing,
That's not gonna work.
totally different outcome than if you're I know I got 300 tools and one of them is going to work.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the beautiful part of being in the world we're in, where you literally don't know. You may have been on 1,000 domestics.
You can't plan everything. You can't. You have to be prepared for everything. I think
Yeah.
that's the key.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm prepared for whatever happens here. And I love this. I don't know who I could, attribute it to, but, and I think it applies with everything, but I definitely use it in police work. You have to plan for the worst, but hope for the best.
Mm-hmm.
So I am prepared that this is going to really suck, that this is going to be the worst situation ever, but I don't want it to go that way. I want it to just be like, oh, it was a mistake. I dialed 911 on accident. Great. Have a good day.
Right.
I'm gone.
Right. But that's what people don't get with most cops and most successful cops who then, and I think there is a tie into entrepreneurship in people like us, where I'm a risk taker.
Sure.
I'm not taking stupid risks, right? I'm not just throw shit to the wind and see what happens. Like, I understand when I do something, it's intentional.
Yeah.
And I've weighed outcome possibilities, right? When I get jammed up at work by my bosses, I did it on purpose. Like, I did that. I didn't do it because I didn't know what I was doing. I chose that.
Mm-hmm.
And I weighed it, and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, it could end this way, and maybe it does. Sometimes it happens, but
Sure.
sometimes it goes the opposite way, and I'm willing to make those risks. And I think in entrepreneurship, you have to be willing to put yourself out there. I borrowed $150,000 in 2009 from a person I didn't think I'd ever be able to pay back, and I did. Didn't borrow it from a bank; I borrowed it from a human, which is even worse.
Sure.
That person got a face, and they can call you, and you owe them something.
Mm-hmm.
And having that oh shit factor when you make servant salary, right? You're not making. I don't have unbelievable growth potential in my income as a public servant. So you got to be successful then. So you have to be able to bet on yourself, and you have to be able to bet on that your ability to bring on people to assist you in things, that your ability to hire, and that your ability to read personalities and talents is good. And that's where the understanding human behavior and understanding body language comes in. Like, all the things that we do as a cop, translate if you have a desire to be more. There is way more things you can do in the entrepreneurial world, having been a cop, than any other profession. Cops want to go become security guards, whatever. Great, go do that.
No, never.
I was a bodyguard for 20 years. I was Tim Tebow's bodyguard for 4. Hence the Tebow wall.
Got it.
But that was one of my first businesses. I started with a bodyguarding business. So I think there is a beauty, a crazy beauty behind the life of being a cop, and being able to be thrust into unknown situations on a daily. Yeah. And even though the theme may be the same, 911 hang up, or a domestic, or a disturbance, or a bar fight, the theme's the same. What happens in it is unique.
Yes.
And that adaptability, I think, is what's helped you become so successful with your business, and helping men figure out their shit, so that they live more productive, healthier, robust lives, so that you can continue to grow your business and become, have these free summits. I don't know why you're doing a free summit, but whatever. Who am I to judge? It's COVID period. I get it. Everybody's sort of on the bottom end, still worrying about their PPP and all the stuff from Congress. But I appreciated this conversation because I don't get the chance to talk to. I've had many cops, many people that I've worked with in counterterrorism and S.W.A.T and military, but never one that also started their own coaching type building business like you did. And it's good to see someone, because I think cops need to know. Like, I haven't identified as a cop in a very long time.
Right. Yeah. Good.
And probably 20 years. My life, since probably 2006. So 14 years. But cops need to know that there's options.
Yeah.
And you don't have to
something else.
Yeah, and there's something else. But it's not like you're a cop and then you become the dinosaur, which I am now in my department. And I'm the guy that's like, no, let's calm down. Let's take our time to get there. Why rush? Funny story. Before we close out, I was a rookie, at a field training officer who was a Southern guy in suburban Philadelphia, in a very urban town outside of Philly, where I was a cop. And E.J. Woyton, his name was. He passed. He's since passed. But he was from Virginia Beach originally, and he was a cop down there first, and then moved up north with his wife and became a cop in our town. And I'm riding along with him, and we're going to a fight on the corner of this one drug corner. And we pull up, and I'm about ready to get out of the car, and he goes, grabs my arm, he goes, settle down, boy. I said, they're fucking killing each other. He goes, I know. I said, we're just gonna let them do it. He goes, fucking ain't right, we are. We're gonna wait till they're good and fucking tired. Then I'm gonna go over and say, I'm gonna put these cuffs on. You guys done? And he goes, I said, really? He goes, I'm not getting out and getting my ass hurt. Let them boys hurt themselves. And I've always thought, I'm like, man, I wanted to get out there and mix it up, right? I want to roll around. And he's like, no, take your fucking time. Don't be such a goddamn rush. It's like the old bull and the young bull, right?
Yeah.
I'm the old bull now, and I never wanted to be that guy, but now I'm there, right? So now I'm the old guy saying, calm down, take your time. It's gonna be there when we get there. And it's a strange place to be, the old guy.
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm only 50, and I'm the old guy. But I think cops need to know that outside of police work, there's a whole new world for them if they open their eyes and network themselves with people like you, so they can understand that there's a place for the skill set that they have in the real world that they can then utilize without having to once again work midnight shift guarding some car lot, making $18 an hour, working from Allied Security or whatever, which is always the transition point. Right?
Yes.
So listen, brother, I appreciate you. Give your website one more time so everybody knows what it is.
Yeah, for the summit, it's summit.confidenceunchained.com. My normal website is just confidenceunchained.com.
Everybody, thank you to Justin. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a fan of the show and appreciating the wide array of guests that I have on the show. I used to plan these out as far as like scheduling, but now it's just someone will introduce me. I've been in the gig long enough that people are calling me saying, hey, you got to introduce to this person. And thank you to Lucas Mack for introducing me to Justin Atherton, and such an amazing guy, amazing talent, still serving to this day and still putting extra time in doing his Confidence Unchained, which I think is a brilliant name. and it's something that I think if we can all unleash our confidence and use it to the best of our ability, we're all going to be better leaders, better husbands, better wives, daughters, sons, whatever, productive members of society, living an intentional, purposeful life. Everybody, God bless, and go out and be kind to one another.